So I came to GW in 1991, and one of the first things that my then chair did, she took me to what she called visit вежливости, right? So kind of a formal visit of introduction to Jim Millar, who was director of IERES. At that time, it was still Sino-Soviet, and it was housed at that time in Gelman, in the Gelman Library building on the 6th floor, and it occupied a suite there, and most of the members, and that was Carl Linden and Jim himself and Charlie Elliott and Sharon Wolchik, they all had their offices there. And so I took with me my CV. He looked at it and the list of publications, and he seemed to really like it. And he asked me right there, he said, "Do you want to be a member of the Institute?" I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "What do I need to do?" "Well, you just, write me a brief letter." And then, so I did that. And so I became a member in fall of 1991. And then, it was a very different institute than it is today, of course, right? So there were maybe 10 or 12 members altogether. And there were a few events, but they were small scale events with, again, the members gathering, and there was tea and some cookies, and then listening to all kinds of topics. What was interesting is that despite the different disciplines that the members represented, so Jim Millar was an economist, Carl Linden, he was a political philosopher, Charlie Elliott, he was a security specialist, and so on. They all had an interest in Russia and the Soviet Union as such. So, for example, I gave a talk on Dostoevsky, and that was something that I was working on and interested in, and they were all eager to listen. They were all interested. Nobody would say, "Oh, this is not my field, so I'm not going to come." And that I was impressed by that. And so the institute members showed, first of all, they were senior faculty members, right? And they had a huge amount of experience. I mean, they had worked on the Soviet Union for 30 years and had been there and had published books on that and so on. And then they showed a real genuine interest in my own research, and it was not a fake interest. It was genuine. So this was kind of the how I remember how it started. It was a friendly, family type, very cordial, and at the same time intellectually alert and intellectually interested, a kind of environment in which young scholars really found resonance to what they were doing and interest in what they were doing, and that was very important for me. Basically, when Ukraine began to become an area of turbulence internationally and geopolitically, the Institute actually very early reacted to that, because there was very little expertise on Ukraine in the United States. There was some in Canada, and there was, of course, Harvard, the Harvard Ukraine Center, and so on. But other than that, it was really the Institute that had it, and it had to do with Colonel William Petrach. Colonel Petrach was one of those donors who were actually fascinated by what Jim Millar told them about the Institute, and he came to all of our events. And he already was in his late 70s, and he attended both the social and the scholarly events. And in the end, he liked what he saw so much that he decided to actually make us the heir to his fortune. And of course, the condition was that this money that he gave us, the Petrach Fund, would actually benefit Ukraine-related events or Ukraine-related initiatives like hiring somebody or bringing in graduate students or things like that. And we did that. We had the money to do it, and we had the obligation to do it, because this was something we had agreed to. Apart from the fact that Colonel Petrach was a charming man and a really, really interesting source of information. He had seen so much in World War II and afterwards, and so on. And but so Jim Goldgarry was the one who really used that money to great effect, so that Ukraine-related events, which in the beginning did not attract too many people, and only then when Ukraine really began to become a focus, of international developments and tension and so on, then this really paid off. And so I would say world events or geopolitical shifts that influenced the Institute, Ukraine is one, definitely one. Another one is Europe. So Europe, of course, was very calm and steady and it seemed predictable in the 1990s. And then in the 2000s, it began to actually move, and there were crises, and there was populism, and nothing seemed as secure as it used to seem in the 1990s. And so suddenly there was a higher demand for Europe-related scholarly, cooperation and grants and so on. And we began to build this in the Institute. So with Kimberly Morgan, later with Erwan Lagadek, with Harris Milonas, or later Hilary Silver. So all scholars who actually, Hope Harrison, of course, who was director and who did a lot on Germany and Germany-related events. So I would say the developments in Europe, they actually made an impact on the Institute and the Europe part, right? So Institute for European, Russian, Eurasian Studies, the Europe part, where we had representation for Central Europe through Hugh Agnew and Sharon Wolchik, but then the Western European part became more intensely represented by the faculty whom I named here, and we became, if not a leading center, but we became a visible address for Western European questions, including, for example, Brexit and so on. So, we had a former Greek foreign minister there who spoke about the danger of Brexit at a time when nobody actually saw it coming, and so on. So we did quite a bit on Western Europe when it began to become less predictable and more complicated. When I became director in 2012, the most important challenge that I realized at that point was that there are many powerful parts in the Institute, but they were acting more like a federation. They were not really integrated with each other. And then when the Central Asia program began to grow, and it was really, in the beginning, it was very small, and then it began to really blossom like quite astonishingly. And then the Arctic program and so on, this became more and more of a challenge to make sure that these are not islands in the stream, but that they all have something in common and work together, and that we attend each other's events, and that we participate in discussions and so on. And there the director really has had and has an important field for initiatives and for activity to make sure that first and foremost, we are all IERES members, and that, whether it's PONARS or CAP or Arctic and so on, all of that has one thing in common. We are within this IERES framework, and you can call it a federation because, in a way, being together makes us stronger than if each part were to be alone. And so IERES, I think, became a very good environment for these parts, and the director's main and I would say kind of noble challenge was to keep that thought of togetherness alive.